Okay, I'll go ahead and call the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District Board Work Session for September 3rd, 2025 to order. And this meeting is being recorded. And Wendy, if you can please call the roll.
Thank you. Chair Stegman indicated she was not able to attend. Ariana Johnson.
Here, present. Counted for.
Kayla Calkins.
Here.
Nick Lane.
Here.
Eric Mueller indicated is not able to attend. Phil Ralston.
Here.
Heather King.
Here.
Quinta Johannes, not present. Dan Eisenbeis, not present. There are 5 members present, and that is a quorum.
Great, thank you. And Directors Mueller and Stegman and others all have pretty significant conflicts of interest. They send their best and apologies.
Conflicts of schedule, not conflicts of interest.
Conflicts of interest, yeah. Conflicting interests and schedule effects. Chair Stegman obviously is not here, so I'm going to go ahead and preside. But I'd like to just have a quick comment about what this meeting is and isn't. We do have a quorum, so, but this is a meeting just for informational purposes, for question and answer. It's a work session, not a decision-making session. And so we're not going to be deliberating policy matters or making any decisions or having any votes on anything. Probably the best value of today in my mind is it's an opportunity for us to learn and ask questions and leave this session with a better understanding of the Watershed Improvement Plan project than when we came in. I'd like to run this meeting in a very informal way so we can just be conversational. I'd like all the directors, if they have questions or comments, direct them directly to the project team. Doesn't have to go through me unless there's a question about board function or process or something like that. For the members of the public that are participating, I think there are 2. I'll try to make some space intermittently throughout the meeting to check in with you to see, as a courtesy, if you happen to have any questions. And we'll see how that goes. The topic today is an update on the district's watershed improvement plan, which is mandated by our enabling legislation, and that language can be found in Oregon Revised Statutes 550. And today I would like to welcome the team, which sponsor is Carrie Sanneman, environmental program manager. The project manager is Amber Ayers, and environmental engineers McKenna Bell. So thank you guys for all the effort you put in to prepare this for us and to give us an opportunity to learn and ask questions. Really appreciate it. But I'll ask Colin Rowan, Director of Planning and Public Affairs, to kick it off. And again, I'd like to keep this really informal, so board members feel free to follow Colin's guidance in terms of when to ask questions and have a free-flowing conversation. So with that, welcome everybody. Thank you for taking the time to be here. And Colin, take it away.
Thanks, Director Ralston. Really appreciate all of your time, all the board members. Again, Colin Rowan, Director of Planning and Public Affairs, and I'm just really excited to introduce the project team. You've heard a bit about this work, but I did want to begin with a quick reflection and a note of gratitude. And I was going back through notes and really about how the district was established, which was through a lot of conversation and a lot of coordination across different entities, public and private, nonprofits, community groups, and looking at some notes from the fall of 2018 and finding notes from a series of meetings that we had through the Levy Ready Columbia partnership, where we scoped out the language that is in the legislation that eventually became ORS 550. And in those meetings, the group identified a really clear vision for what is today the Urban Flood Safety and Water Quality District, and how that legislative concept could build into something that really changes our region's approach to flood safety and look for multi-benefit ways to provide more uplift, more environmental work to contribute to water quality, build resilience, and embed equity into all the work that we do, amongst other things. And in those notes, there was a strong desire to make sure that we were able to strengthen ongoing existing relationships through collaboration, that we aligned our efforts with the efforts of other entities and community-based organizations, other government entities, so that we would be able to leverage through those partnerships this more resilient and brighter future. And so it is pretty amazing that we are now at this moment where we're actually going through and doing the work that was identified in that statute, and through all those conversations, hundreds of hours of conversation, really community values that were reflected in the legislation is what we're doing now. And so while, of course, it is a statutory requirement, I think it's also just a really important roadmap and document for our staff to follow and for your board to guide us on identifying future strategies and investments. So as the planning efforts begin, I just definitely want to share a lot of gratitude for so many in this community that contributed to this vision, and for you as board members for guiding its development, and especially for the staff that's going to be working on it. Excited to see how this leads us into the future. So with that, I want to turn it over to Carrie Sandeman, and thank you all for attending.
Thanks, Colin. Wendy, you can go ahead and share the slides when you're ready. Thank you. So thank you for the introduction. As Phil said, I am the environmental program manager. I also lead the planning department at the district, and then the sponsor for this project, and was deeply involved in kind of developing the scope of the project as it now exists. It's something that I've been thinking about for a long time, because that legislation was passed just after the environmental program manager position was created, and I joined the district. And honestly, people have been asking me about this for the last 6 years. So it's really exciting that we were able to take all of those thoughts and ideas and get started here. So the purpose of this is to provide a briefing. The last time you heard from me was when we were approving the contract to start working with our consulting team at Knott Studios. We've had about a month and a half with them. We're really getting that team up to speed, getting them out on the landscape to see the watershed and get going, and working towards our first deliverable, which is an equity and engagement plan. And so the other part of this, beyond the briefing of what we're going to be doing through this plan, will be to hear from you about how we engage the board. And we have a proposed approach that we can have some discussion about and make sure provides opportunities for you to be meaningfully engaged at the level that you want to be. So I'll begin with an overview just to kind of give you a flavor of what we're doing and why we're engaging in this, what we think we're going to get out of this planning process, and then I'll hand it over to Amber. As Colin mentioned and as Phil mentioned, this is required by ORS 550-260, and we on the project team are very aware of what those requirements are. We're working to make sure that we're meeting all of those requirements through this process, but we're not going to talk a lot about that today, because it's so much more than that. I mean, frankly, it's a great idea. I'm so glad it was in the legislation, because it is our opportunity as we have become the new district to explore and plan for a new way of doing our work. A way of delivering flood safety where watershed health and the flood safety of our community are really working hand in hand and supporting each other. And within that, it's specifically a chance to identify floodplain restoration and resilience projects. That's a category that was set aside by the board in the general obligation bond, $27.7 million. And so as part of this planning process, we want to identify and prioritize locations for floodplain restoration projects. All right, you can go to the next slide, please. Because within the Columbia Slough watershed, our area is the floodplain. The image that you see here is like a wild, beautiful river floodplain, right? Where you have the land and the water and riparian vegetation. You might have water going up and down year to year. Floodplains are incredibly dynamic and resilient places, and ours does not look like this. Right? We often call it the managed floodplain for a reason. That is a highly managed and controlled system. However, the things that you see going on in this image from A and B on the bottom, where we have microorganisms and invertebrates, these kind of foundations of the food chain, all the way up to megafauna on the top, we can use and think about how we can enhance our natural systems within the managed floodplain to provide some of those benefits through the way that we deliver our flood safety services. And that's a big part of what this watershed improvement plan is going to do. By taking a watershed approach, by thinking about the fact that we're in a floodplain, what are the natural functions and processes in a floodplain, and how can we work with nature to do our jobs better? Next slide, please. This image, I think, is probably a lot closer to what may be possible in our system. This is a project in the UK, but I really love it because I feel like you see here that there are people living and working and potentially recreating in the floodplain alongside a waterway that's providing some of those same benefits. Next slide, Wendy. And so, again, we'll be looking for ways to get closer to something like this, where we're using a highly modified system, but finding ways for nature to help us do our job better and ways that we can enhance nature through how we do our job. So to get more specific, narrow down a little bit more. Next slide, please. One of the main things that we do is maintain the conveyance and pumping systems, the ditches, the slough, the pump stations to move water through and out of the system. And in the watershed planning process, we want to be exploring ways to work with the natural hydrology of the system, to integrate natural flood storage, and to work with natural and native vegetation. So the images you see on the top, these are things that we're all already doing, but I think provide a concrete example. On the top, you see a before and after of a ditch in the Delta Park section. We've been partnering with the city of Portland for many years to manage invasive aquatic plants. The plants slow the movement of water through the system. They compete with native vegetation. When they die, because there's so much plant matter, they suck up a lot of oxygen and make the water column really inhospitable for our native species. And they also create a very large maintenance burden when all of those plants come down to our pump stations and can clog the pumps and create a lot of work for operations. So by working with the city, working with Mosaic Ecology to manage these invasive aquatic plants, we're providing benefits to the flood safety system, and we're providing benefits to the natural environment. The image on the bottom is the port's sundial wetlands. This is near our Sandy pump station out in Fairview. And this is a good example of natural flood storage that we're already using within the system. So yeah, I think the cursor was right over the Sandy pump station there and the forebay. And then there's another tiny little building about halfway through the forebay that is a weir. So when the Sandy pump station cannot keep up with the water coming into the system, we can close that weir and allow that area to flood and hold additional water while our pump station keeps up. That's just an excellent example of the way that natural flood storage can provide resiliency and redundancy in our system. The PMLS project is planning to replace that pump station with something bigger, and hopefully we won't need to use this backup option as often. Again, redundancy and resiliency are one of those ways that we get to plan for an uncertain future. And so through the watershed improvement planning process, we're going to be looking for more opportunities to do work like this. Where on the landscape do we have a location to integrate more flood storage? Where will it be most beneficial for us, for our pump stations, to have the capacity to hold more water on the landscape? Okay, next slide, please. And then on the levy side, through our work to maintain and strengthen our federally accredited levy system, the Watershed Improvement Plan provides an opportunity to explore where can we integrate more native plants, pollinator-friendly seed mixes, create more natural vegetation and habitat, or even move levees away from the waterways. Those are just a few of the things we'll be thinking about. The images you see here up on the top are some small pilot plots east of 33rd Avenue, where we, and again in consultation with Bureau of Environmental Services, put together a native pollinator planting mix to try out for a few years. And we're working on the memo of summarizing our lessons there, but I can say there's more to learn. Levees are a pretty severe place to grow plants. They're hot, they're dry. It's easy for other non-native grasses and weeds to compete. But this is a chance to say, well, are there better circumstances? Are there better locations? Where is this a tool? Is this the right tool for us? Or are there others that can help us create more habitat benefit from these large grassland areas that we maintain, and do it, I should say, importantly, consistent with the Army Corps' vegetation standards. Next slide. These are some bigger, some more involved project concepts that we'll be thinking about and exploring through the watershed improvement process. Up on the top, you have an image from our Pen 1 Drainage and Water Quality Master Plan. You see one side of the image is the levee prism, and then there's some additional material beyond that. We call it overbuild, where there are habitat structures anchored and some tiny little stakes implying the planting of native vegetation. This is another example that we've been thinking about for a while, where we've run into some significant challenges with the regulatory process, but we also haven't taken a broad view and said, well, are there certain places where this could work better than others? What is the role that this strategy could have for us, where we'd be able to have more habitat benefit at that important water-land interface, and maintain accreditation, reliability, and the strength of our levee system. On the bottom, these are probably the largest, most involved project concepts we'll be thinking about. This is an example of a levee setback. This is from King County, and the levee used to be right up against the water, like most of ours are, and is now on the far side of the image. So there's some floodplain restoration and a large public park inside that area. And these are projects that create an opportunity for definitely more habitat, more natural vegetation next to the waterway. There are also things that can take many, many years to complete, because there's property acquisition components as well as significant permitting and construction involved. But these are just a few of the ideas that we'll be thinking about, and we'll be figuring out, well, what's best for where, what's the mix that's going to be the highest and best use of our resources and energy and align with our flood safety delivery. One thing that I think will probably pop out from these examples is that we're not starting from scratch. A lot of these are things that we're either already doing or we've started to think about. So the district has had an environmental program for 6 years. We've been looking for practical solutions that involve natural resource management for a lot longer than that. And so the watershed planning process is something I'm really excited about as an intentional and analytical way to take the work that the environmental program has been doing, the opportunities we've been exploring, and think about what's the best and highest things we can be doing in the future. So it's really about building on the work that we're already doing and expanding our view and being more analytical and intentional about where and how these things could be most successful. All right. And the other sort of existing work that the watershed plan is going to be working in close coordination with, next slide, please, Wendy, is our strategic planning and levels of service work. You'll recognize this graphic from your June work session. This is where Matt, Andrew, and Colin were talking about the way we think about planning and different plans being at strategic, operational, or tactical levels. The watershed plan is really going to touch all of these levels, right? But it will specifically be looking at setting goals for watershed improvement, organizational level goals and vision, as well as identifying and prioritizing the ways that we get there. So the part of the watershed improvement plan that's happening up at this strategic level is where we're proposing to really focus the board's energy, because it's where we really do need to hear from you about what our direction should be. With that, I'm going to hand it to Amber to talk more about the planning process and the proposed approach to board engagement.
Carrie, can I cut in for just a sec?
Sure.
Just wondering if now is a good time to ask directors if they have any questions or comments, either one.
Sure.
Hearing none, I'm going to actually extend a courtesy to Mr. Claude Felter and Mr. Stevens, members of the public, and just ask if either of you have any questions, clarification that you'd like to ask at this moment.
This is Frank, and I'm good. Thank you.
Yeah, same with me, Phil. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and I'd like to thank both of you gentlemen for taking the time to participate tonight. Appreciate it. And we'll get back to you as the evening allows here to give you some more opportunities to ask questions if you need to. With that, I guess back to you, Carrie and Amber. Thank you.
Thanks, Director Ralston. We have a few more slides here, and we will have an opportunity for questions here in just a few minutes as well. Thanks, Carrie. I want to be building off the context that she just laid out. I want to walk you through what we were aiming to achieve with this plan. The Watershed Improvement Plan is more than a requirement. As you've heard, it's our roadmap for the next decade and beyond. It's a multi-year, district-wide effort that will shape how we protect our communities and our environment. Next slide, please. Our first priority is flood safety and compliance. The plan will strengthen flood risk reduction and ensure we fulfill all legal requirements under ORS 550. We're committed to science-based understanding of our watershed. We're going to be drawing on rigorous data as well as community knowledge to create a strong and resilient foundation. A core goal is articulating a shared future vision. What does success look like when watershed health and flood safety are working hand in hand and not at odds with one another? Strong-based engagement is going to be essential to this process. We want genuine, meaningful participation from the board, staff, partners, and the community from start to finish. Real progress will require solutions and partnerships, finding strategies that maximize benefits for both resilience and habitat, and leveraging the strengths of our partners. Throughout, we are committed to transparency and accessibility, making sure information is clear and showing exactly how input from the board and community guides our work. So your insights now and throughout the process will ensure the plan reflects our district values, regulatory obligations, and the legacy that we're building together. Next slide, please. All right, let's walk through the project phases and highlight where and how we see engagement shaping this plan. We're intentionally building in opportunities for board involvement throughout plan development, not just as the final stages of approval approach. It will be shaped by a combination of technical analysis, community perspectives, and of course, the board's values and priorities. As you can see, early input can shape how engagement is designed, how district priorities are framed, and how the overall process is unfolding. Later on, your input will focus on strategy, visioning, prioritization, and key policies. As you can see, defining the desired future conditions of our watershed, it's projected actually for spring of 2026, is one of the most important strategic touch points in this whole process. It's going to be anchoring every project, decision, and investment that will follow. As the plan progresses, board input will be central to helping set evaluation criteria, and finally, all the way to reviewing how individual projects are going to be prioritized for implementation. We can go to the next slide. All right, now I want to highlight how we see our role in this process and how we'll work with you along the way. We're designing this plan so that your engagement is early, ongoing, and impactful. The goal is to focus your time on strategy level input, setting visions, goals, and priorities. We'll be building in multiple points of engagement throughout the plan. That means not just at final review, but opportunities along the way. Work sessions will be where we bring you into deeper discussions, like shaping vision and evaluation criteria. Packet updates will keep you informed along the way without needing to have meeting time. And finally, board meetings will be used for direction and eventually decisions. Our intent here is to make sure that your time and input are focused where they matter most, on shaping the big picture direction of the watershed plan. Next slide, please. All right, we do want to wrap up this presentation by having a discussion and opening up the room for questions. As like I said, this feedback is really helping how we're going to shape engaging with you over the next couple of years. Are there particular types of information or level of detail that would help you feel prepared in order to weigh in on some important decisions throughout the process? So this time is open for feedback, and we just want to open it up and appreciate you coming along and hearing about this.
Should I leave the slides up, Amber, or do you want?
You know, it might be helpful to, if you go back a couple slides, I think that that's it shows the timeline, and it's a really nice one that just kind of gets you thinking. As you see, we're very early on. Carrie just said that we have just, we were only a month and a half into the process with the consultant. We've done a couple of exercises. We've taken the group on a couple of site tours, so 2 half-day site tours. So they're really learning the system. And then they'll be kind of diving into a lot of important reference materials coming up.
Director Calkins?
Yes, I had a clarifying question. Thank you, Carrie and Amber. How does our watershed planning interact with the other watersheds that surround us? So where does it kind of start and stop?
Yeah, the boundaries are set in the legislation, essentially that it is the managed floodplain is where the area of action for the watershed plan. The managed floodplain is not the entire Columbia Slough watershed. There's the areas up to Alameda Ridge, out to Kelly Point Park, over in Gresham and others that come into our system. And so we'll certainly be thinking about those from a process perspective. So that's kind of from a just lines on the map. But another thing that is in the legislation, and I hope we would have done otherwise, is that we have a requirement to coordinate with the plans of the overlapping jurisdictions. So within our engagement, we have all of the, the county, the jurisdictions, the port, and we'll be working with them to see the connection points between the work that they're doing. And then I think on the much bigger scale, right, we're part of the Columbia River watershed, and I don't anticipate a lot of back and forth sort of collaboration on that scale, but we certainly will be thinking about how the context of the Columbia River watershed, the Columbia River Treaty, some changes we may see in water levels as a result of the Columbia River Treaty will affect us. Some other things that kind of come at that biggest scale, for example, that when we think about reducing flood risk through flood storage, we're really talking about internal drainage events because the Columbia River is so large and the volume of water there is so large that we already know we're not able to have a measurable impact. So we kind of will not be thinking as much about reducing Columbia River flood risk through flood storage. We'll be focusing on. So that's another way that maybe at that biggest level. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
Wendy, you want to go back to the last slide just for a second?
I think something on this
Sorry,
last
which
slide
one?
that we put there intentionally was just to say, is there anything else that would be helpful to, context, background information as we move from this to that next engagement point Amber mentioned during of the desired future condition, that kind of visioning and goal setting stage? Please, today or in the future, we'll certainly be thinking about how to make sure that you have the context and information you need to engage in that process. But I'd love to hear from you if there's anything that we could do. Director Ralston?
I have a couple of comments, I guess, or questions. One is, what's your planning horizon in terms of time? Are you looking out 10 years, 50 years, 100 years? That's one question. The other question, I'll get to after you answer.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think we're going to really narrow that down when we do that vision and goal setting. My expectation is that when we're talking about a desired future condition, we're talking 50 plus years in the future. We want to be able to be creative and expansive and kind of hopeful and aspirational, right? We got here in over 100 years of activity and management of this system. And I would like to be thinking about where do we want to be in that further planning horizon. However, when we get to the priority opportunities and the implementation plan, we are talking about more like a 2 to 10 year horizon. The plan is meant to be updated every 10 years. And then that's also lines up with our bond implementation timeline, and also things that are going to be really actionable for us to get started on and be thinking about from a budget and revenue perspective.
The other question, thank you. The other question I had is around how you tie this into risk management decisions or risk mitigation for flood damage, that kind of thing. In terms of the visioning, are you going to try to attach improvements that come out of the plan to risk mitigation goals, like qualitative or quantitative risk mitigation goals or risk management goals?
Colin, do you want to take a start at that? I have an idea, but
I do. And so I think one thing, and it'll actually be at the September 18th meeting, but we have been updating our capital improvement plan evaluation criteria. And so this is something that we made sort of one effort in for last year and a bigger effort for this year. And one of the things that we are doing this year is passing everything that gets scored through a risk lens, so that we can make some risk informed decisions. And we'll be able to do that for some of these watershed health projects that have a direct flood safety connection. And so that will go through a similar evaluation, even if the criteria are different than some of the sort of standard flood safety ones. And Carrie, anything you want to add to that?
I think that's a good start. I mean, we're really learning when it comes to the watershed improvement practices that the district will invest in, and we'll be working closely with the board through this and through the budget process to determine what those priorities are. Everything we do needs to be connected back to flood safety, needs to be consistent with our flood safety mission. And I think it's something for us to explore as to whether things that have significant benefits for the natural environment, how they are competing against things that are of a more traditional built infrastructure component when it comes to sort of risk reduction per dollar value. So that's something we'll be exploring as we have a more concrete idea of what the watershed-based strategies available to us are in specific locations and cost and the kind of benefits that they'll deliver.
Thanks.
These are great questions. Yeah.
I've got a quick one. I guess it's less of like a specific question at this point and more of kind of a visioning for what kinds of stuff I find helpful or I think might be helpful when we're talking about this. And one of the things is I know I'm out here on Fairview Lake, so I feel like I'm representing in some way like a lot of Interlock and in a lot of this neighborhood, and people have a lot of feelings and a lot of thoughts, and not all of them are doable by any one agency or organization just based on control of different systems. So I guess one of the things that I feel like I would love to continue to see, and I feel like, you know, we've been doing a great job of this, but what is within a plan, like what is within the bounds of what is actually achievable just by the district alone, or what might be part of a wider plan that will then need help to be implemented by a bunch of different people all working together, I guess. So that's, yeah.
Thank you. That's a wonderful point, and part of the engagement, you know, from the beginning, and as I mentioned, the engagement with the other jurisdictions, we are still the small, you know, we're still pretty darn small in the scheme of some of our partners, and also in terms of our land management capacity, our property, real estate holdings, our ability to provide natural resource expertise. And it is my strong hope and intention that we are looking at all cases for opportunities to be partnering with those other government agencies and with also the kind of state and federal interests that may be able to support work in our area. So yeah, it's really, I think, pretty intimidating to think about the scale of potential in this watershed if it's just us, but it is so much more. One of the things I think about with this planning effort and with our program, you know, is what do we have? We have a lot of challenges and we have so many constraints. This is an industrialized area. It's zoned industrial. It has a history and a legacy of contamination and development. But what do we have to really work with? And I think that it's the partnerships. It's our community partnerships like the Columbia Slough Watershed Council, you know, the folks who are getting outside and using our area. It's our many government partners. So I feel like that is pivotal to having an impact through this work. And our hope is that by sort of narrowing from what's possible to what's the priority, we still have a whole lot of things that might not be the priority for us, but we're defining and talking about with our partners because maybe it's a priority we could do a little bit. You know, we could do our part of it, and the city of Portland or Metro or others could be doing the part that makes the most sense for them. So yes, absolutely. I think, and you know, to your point about people have a lot of feelings, they also are not all consistent. So we'll need to be navigating that as well. So I think the things that we can do with a lot of consensus from multiple partners will probably take a little longer, but they'll be that much more durable by virtue of having those folks involved in having our objectives aligned.
If I can just give a quick early example that may or may not go anywhere, but Metro is doing some planning for Blue Lake Park, and they have an area that they're struggling with some invasive vegetation that if it could be wet more, might help them with their management objective and be more consistent with their mission. We know we have Salmon Creek and we have the Gate Tower project right over there. So we don't know whether we can figure something out, but that's the kind of thing where it looks like there's at least an opportunity to put a little water from time to time on a willing landowner's property. But it may or may not pencil out. It's super early, but those are the kinds of things we're thinking about and trying. Carrie and her team and Colin and everybody's doing really great relationship building with all the folks who are thinking about this. And they're aware we have a little bit of cash. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how much partnership we can create. And I think it's going to be a lot. And staff, correct me if I said something I shouldn't have.
That's right. That's right on. And I think by virtue of having some dollars that are protected in our general obligation bond, as Jim said, when folks know that you may have some resources available, I feel like the opportunities come to us. We're getting those phone calls, we're getting those, and that's wonderful. And this planning process will help us really establish when we get opportunities in the door, what are our priorities? How do we evaluate them? What is going to be the role? How do we determine the role for us that makes the most sense in that proposal, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think that was my other question as we look towards, I think you said, Amber, it was this spring when we'll be looking at kind of the decision making relative to prioritization, how that will influence budget as we get into the work. So just so I understand correctly, for the rest of 2025 and 2025, 2026 until our July 31st timeframe, there's no additional budget that would go towards this. It's all part of this planning process that we're in. And then at what point would we receive additional budget asks, and how, based on the plan, would we be able to prioritize those relative to what we can realistically do for our core functions relative to flood safety, and where might we actually rely on others for that work? So I'm just wondering, like, when in the process we'll have that information, and when the budget asks will hit.
Yeah. Amber, do you want to answer it, or should I?
You go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think, as I mentioned, the environmental program is not new. These ideas that we're exploring new ways of using natural resource management to deliver our flood safety mission, or we're looking for ways to have a lower impact or a higher benefit through how we do our work. That's already part of the environmental program budget. And I think that we're trying to, use that strategically year to year to learn more and feed that into this process so that they are not starting from scratch. So I think you can anticipate that we'll keep doing that as part of the environmental program this budget year. I don't anticipate significant changes. Nothing's, come up so far that would kind of really be happening because we're trying to learn and feed into this. I think by the fiscal 26, 27, is that what the next one? We will probably have like some project concepts, maybe for floodplain restoration and resilience project. Like, we may be able to move some things forward a little bit by then, before the plan is totally finalized. But when our evaluation of priority opportunities component, once we've gotten through that, I think that difference between that kind of fourth box down and the fifth is where we'll have some things to say. Okay, we've identified these, we've prioritized them, we feel like they're important. Are they things that we are able to get started on? So not this coming budget cycle, but the next one. And at that point, we will have worked with you on what are the evaluation criteria, what are our priorities, so that you're seeing things that align with that.
Great, thank you.
And then I'm still hoping that somebody's going to come in with a beautiful piece of floodplain that we can put water on without, maybe we buy it and turn it over to somebody else to manage. So I'm still waiting to win the lottery on floodplain storage. We haven't done it yet, but could happen. And then we would come to you with the golden goose and ask you if you're interested in it or not.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point. I mean, we're not just waiting. We're not saying like, oh, we need to wait 2 years before we can, do anything. But we are conscious of the fact that by going through this process, we might find out there would have been a a different thing we would have chosen and some, but if those opportunities come up that are just too good to pass up, that are time sensitive, that we know have benefit for the flood safety system, you would hear from us specifically on that.
Not this year, not next year's budget, the year after, you should have some priority projects included for your evaluation and approval. That's the goal.
And I also just want to note that we are currently doing capital project designs, and in those designs we're doing multi-benefit. We're considering alternatives that have multi-benefit functions, environmental function. A good example of that is as we were developing the Salmon Creek project, a few of the alternatives were sort of, actually regrading the side of the levee, taking down all the trees, removing all of the burrowing animals. And we were able to identify an alternative that allowed that slope to sort of function as it currently does, burrowing animals to continue to go in there, basically moving the center of the levee back away, and therefore keeping the flood safety, having lower costs, and also allowing for that natural function, not having to sort of remove everything. So just looking for those opportunities in all the capital projects is happening right now.
I'm going to do a quick time check here. We got a late start. The agenda said we'd run about an hour. Are folks willing to stick around for another 15 minutes or so? Thumbs up. Okay, and I'd like to ask Directors King and Lane, you haven't had a chance to jump in yet. If you had anything in particular you'd like to ask or comment on.
Nothing super specific. This is interesting. I appreciate the opportunity to kind of see the process unfold. Something I was thinking about, and it's almost a follow-on maybe to Ariana's question, and I expect I'll see more about it in the next phase of watershed characterization. But I'd be interested in, some kind of summary, whether it's a narrative or map or whatever, of kind of opportunities and like a heat map almost of opportunities, right? Like there's a wide range of habitat and watershed quality, I think, throughout the floodplain. There's probably places that are so messed up that, trying to do anything there would eat up all of our resources, and other places that offer more bang for the buck. I'm just interested in some of those, characterizations and qualitative value judgments about what we can get where and what makes most sense. Those conversations, I think, will be interesting.
I think that we definitely expect some pretty great communication materials coming out of this process. So those are things that we're thinking of too. I think that was one of the things that really actually attracted us to Knott Studios and their team, was particularly some of those their data analysis and their characterization, and those materials that come out were pretty top notch. They were great.
Cool.
I think the only thing I have to ask, and I don't even think it's answerable right now, is I'm wondering what, if at all, what your community engagement is going to look like and who you're going to be reaching out to.
Amber, do you want to speak to that from the scope of work?
Sure. Yes. Well, we've done a little bit of efforts right now. We've done some exercises kind of internally, kind of brainstorming those lists on, folks that are going to be impacted and people that are involved and kind of influence as well in the area. And we are kind of coming out of that process. What will come out of it is equity engagement strategy that they will propose to us. And so that will guide our efforts in that. So that is under development right now.
And I will share, during the workshop, we had a pretty big list that we were working on, and then we tried to put it in a somewhat qualitative matrix of who had the most influence, who was most impacted, so that we could prioritize, because we can't talk to everyone. And that, again, the consultants digesting that is going to come back with some recommendations.
Yeah.
Sorry if I just resaid what you said.
And remind me, are the consultants local, or are they local to the Portland metro area? Okay.
There.
Yeah. Another thing that really caught our eye in their proposal was a lot of the work that they've done with Metro on their bond refinement program and their familiarity with our partners and our community partners. And one of the things I'm not remembering, I think it's 3, they have scoped in a liaison process, so essentially a kind of paid individual that's able to spend some time doing intentional outreach to a particular community, in addition to the other opportunities that we might provide in, say, whether it's webinars or information going out or tours or that kind of thing. So they're gonna be digesting that list and saying, well, how do we reach these different groups? And then what are our priorities for those liaisons?
Thank you.
I'm going to cut in for just a sec. Mr. Stevens and Mr. Clodfelter, do either of you have any questions?
No questions. I just wanted to thank you for looking at. I'm out in Troutdale on the Chalk Chalk Trail, which is a 3-mile segment that was just recently built for biking and pedestrian, and we're working really closely out here with the natural restoration process. So what you're discussing is actually right on topic with community outreach and where you're going. I'm really excited about the plan and how you guys are working it. So thank you so much for all your work.
Thank you.
Sure, Phil, I'll just add, thank you for the invite. This is a really interesting process. I've kind of been following along a little bit when the RFP first came out, and just it really piqued my interest as far as what's what's possible, and there's a lot of opportunities, but there's a lot of constraints. That's for sure. And I've worked in some of the areas that that you identified in the slides, and but it's going to be really interesting to see how this moves forward. And I think a lot of people are going to be really excited about it. And just engaging with the public is great, and I'm interested in the science that comes out of it, and what what new techniques might be employed to kind of maintain the structural integrity of the levees, but also allow for allow for natural processes to occur. So that this is great. So good luck.
Great. Thank you. And stay tuned. Hope you guys stay engaged. Thanks very much. Director Fancher, I know you're not on the agenda, but I just wanted to give you an opportunity to make a comment based on your history and everything else. From what you've heard, is there anything that you'd like to comment on?
Oh, thank you. And hello, everybody. I'm just super happy to be here. Super excited to be part of the part of the planning for this watershed plan and how it fits together with kind of everything else that we're doing in the district. And no, I look forward to getting to know each of you a little bit more and working with you. So thank you very much.
Great. Thanks, Steve. One last thing, we've had a lot of conversations about opportunities and all that, but bringing it back to board involvement and engagement in the project schedule and process. Does anybody have any particular comments or desires or thoughts about either support of what's been presented and proposed, or some other ideas that might complement what's been proposed around the board engagement part? Does it look pretty reasonable from our point of view right now, in terms of touch points and those kinds of things?
I'll say from my point of view, it seems like those are some pretty straightforward places for us to engage, which is great. So I think that this seems very reasonable. And these seem like good entry points for us to continue to have conversation. So
thanks. Other thoughts? Well, maybe I'll flip it to the staff and to the team. If you had one issue or one question that you would like the board to weigh in on for you that would make your life easier sooner than later in terms of planning, structure of the project, whatever. Do you have a sense of what that one burning issue might be that you'd like the board to really focus on in the relative near term?
For me, it was really just, I appreciate you emphasizing that question and double checking. Silence is not always the same as agreement, but that those are the places we're going to be checking back in, I think was really the main thing that I wanted folks to hear from you all today.
Makes sense to me.
Okay, any Colin and team, are you guys have you gotten what you need out of this conversation? I have personally. Is there anything more that you'd like to kind of mine us for or inform us of?
Not at this time. I expect to see us pretty often because this is really a major component of the work that we're doing, preparing not just for the next 10 years that this planning cycle has, but as Carrie said, really many decades beyond. And so I think the other thing that is so important here is being able to sort of go through talking about what the process is, what the outcomes are, but also really making sure, checking in with the board that we have that shared vision of where we're going. So that really, your leadership there and helping at that strategic level is really important. So thank you.
Directors, any last comments before we wrap this up? No?
Say thank you for your time and attention. Appreciate you guys.
Thank you all. Thanks, directors, for making the time, and the project team and the staff. Thanks a bunch for all the work you've gone to put this in a form that's usable for us and something that we can digest and keep thinking about. Shifting gears a little bit, Jim, maybe, or Wendy, you can remind us of when the next board meeting is. September 18th, is that right?
Thank you, yes, Director Olson. The regular meeting time, the third Thursday of the month, is September 18th, 3 p.m. In person and online. So
there we go. Well, good. Any last comments before we adjourn?
If any questions occur to you in the interim, please let us know, and we will do our best to give you good answers in a prompt and efficient way.
Cool. Well, thanks, guys. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting tonight. Thanks very much.
Bye, everybody.
Thanks all.
Good night.
Thanks, Al.
Thank you all.